So the first major area that I kind of address in the video evidence is the providing and communicating clear learning goals. And so I said that this was in video 5B. So it is evident of this when I explained to students that we are going to look at how to integrate evidence within complete sentences, starting with the basics at a level 1, and then throughout the rest of the year, we will continue to work on this skill. And then by the end of the year, arriving at that level 2 and or 3. I mentioned that this is a starting point. The example that I actually write next to the presentation uses the phrase in the text it states, which is the most basic level of introductory phrase. And I emphasize that to them because that is kind of mainly where they're at this point. And again, at the end of the day, I would prefer them to at least start doing that than just inserting a random quote without any sentence attempt at all. I also, in the video, talk about using the brackets around words that I insert in order to make the evidence more of a complete sentence. Again, kind of phrasing that as this is, a level 2 or 3 skill when it comes to integrating evidence, and that at the end of the year, the expectation is that that's where they will arrive. You don't see a specific assessment within this video or any of the videos, but I do kind of reiterate what will be assessed eventually, especially in regards to the standard that they're focusing on in video 7B. So I explained to them that they won't be assessed over identifying theme, which I think is something that they're typically used to, is just sticking in that identify range when it comes to different things within literature, rather than expanding more into the development or analyzing piece of it. And so I really emphasize to them, we're looking at the theme and how it was developed, how it is created. And then I go back through a quick recap of how to determine the theme and how it was created and a possibility of what their answer could be written like. So all of this is just helping them understand, how the progression is working within this one standard. And so that they are truly focusing on, again, that development piece rather than just the identifying. For the direct instruction lesson, they definitely are seeing a whole lot of new content within this lesson. I point out in video 7B, there was a time where students understood that, the important parts of the plot points and the choices that they're making with what plot points to include was determining which ones were connected to our overall topic. So it's not as random anymore as sometimes I think it used to be, of just saying, oh, I remember this moment, so I'm going to put it on my plot mountain, but then ultimately it becomes useless. It's not very beneficial to them anymore if they aren't actually connecting it to the overall topic.
Sorry. Pardon the interruption, but Cameron Glover, student Cameron Glover, please report to the front office if you're still in the building. Once again, Cameron, going down to the front office, please. Thank you.
It's also kind of showing that progression and how the important parts are fitting together, because students know, like, once I identify the theme from using those plot points specifically focused around my topic, then I'm able to take those connected topics of what I pointed out, use them as my examples or my evidence, hopefully be able to create a theme from them, and then hopefully also be able to discuss, okay, here's how the theme was created through the characters. And then they already have several examples listed out. So it's this progression of starting with the plot point, something that is more basic and simple to them, something they've definitely done before in the past, to extending it into how to use that for our theme development. For practicing and deepening lessons, so after the new content was presented to them and we practiced together as a class, they were then able to kind of take what we talked about together and use the 10 to 15 minutes to apply this new content over theme development in their own way. And so they're deepening their understanding by choosing which plot points they want to pull out from the video rather than being told which ones to pull out. And they're not just following what the class shares. They had to create those ideas on their own first rather than relying on all of their peers to give them everything. They simply wouldn't have had enough time to record all of the kind of key points that we addressed if they didn't fill in their plot mountain prior to us coming back together. Sorry. I think it also helps those better understand how the plot is created over time in a text or a film by visually seeing it move forward on the plot mountain rather than just, talking through the different points. Visualizing that within the mountain, I think, definitely helps deepen their understanding in their lessons. Or sorry, yeah, that was the deepening lessons. Knowledge application, again, after having students come to the board and record an example of the plot points, we use those, and students are able to defend their claims when I recognize that some of the plot points that we put within the plot mountain were lacking a lot of description. So we kind of talked about that in the example with the necklace of how important it is to pull out the description piece of it, because that's where you're actually going to get the connection to the topic rather than just the what. What does that what look like, or what is the important part of that what. And so in 7B, again, I explicitly tell them, like, these are lacking description. How do we know this? So defend that we know the exposition that the girl is excited about something. How do we know she's excited? What did we see that tells us she's excited? So they were able to defend themselves with their original ideas for the plot point. Different strategies that are seen in all types of lessons. So I point out a moment in 6B where students are using a short story that was covered in the previous unit as an example to help us work through the process of determining theme development. Within that story, we talked a lot about theme. We talked a lot more focused on, like, the historical context and how the historical context helps create that message and topic. And so we were taking kind of what we already did in previous lessons and now applying it to theme development rather than just identifying a theme or just, being able to determine how a plot moves forward or how the historical context impacts the plot. We were able to take kind of some of that stuff we learned from the previous one and revise their previous understanding and focus now on the theme development. Engagement levels, I point out in 5B. I think there were many moments in any of the videos, though, but students are engaged with how to take notes is towards the beginning, talking about more of the integrating evidence. I think due to the way I communicate how to take notes, show them side by side, kind of what I would do, my modeling techniques, again, applying it to their own lives, allowing them some of that ownership of deciding what they are going to include within their notes. I think that has a different level of engagement than you're typically going to see within a note style lesson per se. There was one specific student too, off to the left of the screen, that I wouldn't say seemed overly eager or engaged at certain moments, but kind of reiterating, it's a take what you need. Writing things down helps you remember. As soon as he kind of hears these two remarks, I think he snapped back into it, became re-engaged, and then he starts writing again. Rules and procedures, again, I think this is kind of shown within each of the different videos. But in 5B, I point out that, right at the beginning of class, I have something on the board that shows the learning target, what we're going to be doing for that day, how to get started. And I use a key symbol for the students to know if it's a phone day or a non-phone day. And so most of the students see that. And before I even have to say anything, they're putting their phones in the caddy. And so, that just shows that the rules and procedures are very laid out, structured for them, easy for them to follow. It's nothing complicated or overdone. The relationships component I said is in 7B. As I'm walking around, giving the different expo markers to students, I didn't ask them if they wanted to give an example. I more so kind of told them, like, hey, you need to give an example of this or go put on this plot point. And I think it's clear that the relationships I've created within the classroom doesn't cause friction when I do this, even if the students would have been surprised that they were picked, or maybe typically wouldn't have volunteered to go up and offer an example. So they feel comfortable enough within my classroom and the environment that I've created within the relationships as well to take a risk or a chance doing something that they typically wouldn't. Communicating high expectations is the last one. And I pointed this out in 7B. The typically reluctant student showed an expression of concern on his face, during that time when I started to monitor and walk around. I can't remember distinctly if he like asked me or if it was just like a recognition of a face, like I have no idea what I'm doing. I need help. And so I actually didn't realize until I wrote the time down that I spent like probably 3 minutes trying to explain not just the contents within the video, but how this is going to then relate over to theme development and helping him work through that process. And he's very intently kind of listening, even though, again, he's a reluctant learner most of the time. He is recognizing that he feels the value of me taking the time to stop to explain to him no matter how long it took. And he's actually sitting by two other students who are typical reluctant learners as well. And you start to notice like they start to listen too as I'm kind of explaining to him. And then after I'm done explaining and I walk away, he begins recording information. So it wasn't just a, one and done kind of thing. Like he actually became fully engaged again and started to put some of the information that we just discussed down into his own work. And that can only come from students of all kinds knowing that there is a high expectation that they kind of follow through.